the public transfers and all the secondary income distribution on the hands of the states. So this shows a region that have more fiscal and in general economic space for countercyclical policies. And actually we saw the use of this, because you may have the possibility and not use it. No, like Europe that has a central bank and does not use as a central bank fully. And here, during the crisis, 2008, 2009, we had this situation in which developing countries and developed countries, both had counter-cyclical responses. But in the case of the developing, and particularly Argentina, Brazil, Mexico here, this was through more fiscal expenditure rather than lower taxation. And this is important, first because the multiplicator is higher in this case, and also because this is contributing then to some long-term goals, either as social redistribution of income and also infrastructure expenditure. That was very important in several developing countries. While in the developed economies, the share of the tax cuts was much more important in these stimulus packages. The other element that has been very relevant is that the policies have not been pro-cyclical either regarding the monetary sector. Because what happened with the Asian crisis of 97-98 is that many countries were very worried about the depreciation of their currencies and overkilled, to some extent, through the monetary policy, the economic activity, and then went into a pro-cyclical policies, with or without the IMF, by the way, and really made a lot of harm, self-inflicted harm to the economies. And now when we had also then the shock, many countries let their currency go, not to infinitum. They continued with active policies in the exchange rate markets and also increased the interest rates, but not to very high levels. And then once the shock was absorbed, the nominal exchange rate went down again. So we are seeing a region that has more tools than before and that are using them, that is using these tools in a more flexible way than before, and with the idea of maintaining growth. So, in conclusion, it is very unusual for Latin America to see to speak of a crisis that is not starting at this part of it within the region, and then, this is an economic shock originated basically in the developed economies that should affect the region. How much it depends on the magnitude of this recession. It will affect it basically through the trade, not only because of the volume, but basically, I think, because of the prices of commodities. This in South America more than in Central America and Mexico. And this is also related to the finance, in the sense that the credit to trade and the financialization of the commodity markets will affect the prices. A response, I am very much in line with what was said about Asia. I think that the response to this threat should be through strengthening domestic and regional markets, and I would add the South-South trade, Now, for the region, the 8.5% of growth of China that is expected for 2012 is maybe more relevant than the minus 0.5 that is expected for Europe. The role for fiscal and income distribution policies in this response, and this may be not only a short-term response, but maybe also shaping a development strategy for Latin America with a more important role for the state and with a different income distribution. For concluding, Latin America has the policy space for applying counter-cyclical policies. It has done in 2008, 2009. It has done again in 2011 because several countries that were worried about the inflation the first half of 2011 relaxed their macroeconomic policies after September. Now that already they are more concerned about growth and have changed towards more supportive policies in the last months. Of course, not all the countries are at the same position. I have shown basically aggregate numbers for Latin America, but I think that this story applies pretty well for most big and medium-sized economies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alfredo, for that Latin American perspective and how sensibly macroeconomics combined with a progressive politics that you did not mention created policy space for Latin America to cope with the crisis in 2008 and to cope with what is to come. It's now 4:30. This is when we were meant to finish the session. We started 15 minutes late. Should we continue, allow a few questions, and we will end at 4:45. Any questions? Yes, delegate from Nigeria.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is the first time I'm doing this work. I got greetings from my ambassador, the family representative of Nigeria, from the United Nations and other organizations. Dr. Calcagno, who is unavoidably absent because of Nigeria and the process as a country. And Nigeria appreciates everything from the South Center in assisting the developing countries in achieving the knowledge and the know-how in the pivotal of the economics. My intervention or my question is based on the perspective of the developing countries about the global economic downturn and the recent crisis. And like Dr. Suldo actually noted, it's like the developing countries and probably especially Africa, if we are not following the new trends in the global economic in the crisis, and then preparing our mind for the next or what will happen next is very important. And that's why we are thinking that, I'm thinking that the South Center, everyone the South Center has done, it's okay, but we will need more in the area of at least enlightening or maybe awakening the developing countries of the next, what is happening next, and how do we prepare ourselves. In a conference on Africa, I raised the idea of Africans or the developing countries trying to mobilize the domestic resources instead of waiting on ODA, which may never happen, will never come, because like Dr. Soludo noted, the policies go this way and it's turning back this way because it may never actually come to realization. So how can the the South Center help the developing countries, maybe to awaken the developing countries on the need to start mobilizing the domestic resources in pushing the effects of the crisis we are in now, or that may come, because we cannot say we should be preparing for the next recession, because it is everybody says it, except the developing countries. We are still waiting for the ODAs, for grants and everything, and I believe, and everybody will believe with me, that it will never come. That is one area. And about the WTO, I've listened to many discussion on WTO, and some said WTO is at the verge of collapsing, is at the verge of, some said it is dead and everything. Then diplomatically, let's say that the WTO is still on, because I don't want to say what others have said. WTO, somebody said, the first speaker talked about the unfinished businesses. The unfinished businesses of WTO, we have the unconcluded Tokyo round, the Uruguay round, the Doha round is not inconclusive. Then we are still talking about WTO, still very much alive. We are talking about WTO plus. The fact remains that when you give something to somebody, it's like you are giving a mandate to somebody on several occasions, and nothing came out of it, and we are still hoping. Anyway, we are still hoping that WTO is not dead yet. So my question is, if the dollar round is inconclusive, after the Uruguay round is not concluded, the dollar round is not concluded, maybe we now have to move the next round to Africa, maybe to be conclusive, because now everybody is now hoping on that the multilateral trade system is hanging, and then maybe, like Dr. Solido suggested, that everybody is on its own. So all the countries, maybe we start mobilizing our own domestic resources and start thinking of how we are going to build on whatever we have or what we are supposed to be having, instead of still living in oblivion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, I will allow 2 more questions, but please brief, because we have to move to the next session. The lady over there. And
thank you
yes,
very much, Mario. I believe that the importance of the initial conditions when the crisis came is very critical to their ability to adjust. And the particular initial condition which appears to have been most important was the level of debt. Now, we see this not only in the developing countries in Latin America, for example, after having gone through the ADs and structural adjustment and programs and so on, most of them had their debt situation under control. So they were able, therefore, to put in place expansionary fiscal policies and to enhance the role of the state. In Europe, we see that they were so highly indebted that they were not able to do that. In addition to which, there might have been philosophical problems that were solved with it. But they were mostly highly indebted and were not able to have expansionary fiscal policies in place and enhance the role of the state in the same way. Now, this works. Expansionary fiscal policies is a workable solution in the short term, or even the medium term, if as long as the resources are available. But over the long term, there can be a difficulty, because one cannot continuously have an expansionary fiscal policy, because you will end up in the same situation of becoming highly indebted. So I have 2 questions. One is there anything that can be done for countries who went into the crisis in a highly indebted situation? And I am not talking about development, developing who were highly indebted and were not able to use expansionary fiscal policy and enhancement of the state of the practice. And secondly, what is it that we can suggest if we are looking at double dip, if we are looking at a long-term situation of recession, how we like to term it, given the fact that expansionary fiscal policies are not feasible over as a long-term solution to the problem. How can we get out of an extended recession depression where the time frame for use of an expansionary fiscal policy can be shortened because of the build-up in debt which results from expansion?
Thank you. One last question, the delegate from Botswana.
No, I'm not from Botswana. I'm from the Congo, sorry. DRC.
Yeah.
My question is to Dr. Soludo. You indicated the challenge of transformation in the economy in Africa. And I'm not quite sure what you meant by that, because you indicated money, and if you can a bit clarify so that I will understand. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, my request to the panelists, please be as brief as you can. We are running into the time for the next session.
Shall I follow the order of the presentations, or would you like me to do it in reverse order? Reverse. Alfredo.
Well, yes, I think that I can partially answer at least the delegate of Barbados. The question of fiscal policy and fiscal policy space should not be seen just as a kind of a stock, of amount of resources that is depleted when you use it. If you use it wisely, it may grow. The question is whether you are following a fiscal policy that really supports growth and in a counter-cyclical way when we are in a crisis. This may not necessarily lead ex ante to a wider deficit. Maybe you can change the composition of expenditure or change the composition of revenues or make some kind of global policy. For instance, if you have reduced some kind of taxation to the rich, you could increase this taxation and at the same time investment or transfers to the poor without aggravating the deficit if you have a deficit, and with positive results in terms of growth that will enhance your policy, your fiscal policy space. And of course, you mentioned that an expansionary fiscal policy cannot continue forever, otherwise you would have 100% of government expenditure in the GDP, of course. So it is not, you must take into consideration, if we are speaking of counter-cyclical measures, then yes, if you are in a crisis, in a depression, you should try to have an expansionary fiscal policy, but stop it if you have recovered from that depression. So that that will be counter-cyclical, otherwise it would not be counter-cyclical. The other question is whether you think that for your development strategy, the level of government expenditures and revenues is too low or too high, then, well, this is another one.
Thank you. Lim, you decide to pass. Nagesh?
Well, very briefly, I think while discussing the fiscal stimulus packages, it's very important to keep in mind that this money spent can bring very important social benefits. So if it is used properly. So it's important to design fiscal stimulus packages in a manner that they reach out to the poorest. And so it's an opportunity, actually, in a way, to design these fiscal stimulus packages to address the development problems that are there persisting in the economies. So poverty reduction, infrastructure gaps, and closing them, which will not only stimulate the economy, but will also achieve the social objectives. Thank you.
Thank you, Nagesh. Charles?
Thank you. Just two quick ones. First is to respond directly to him. The issue of the challenge of transformation in Africa is a very big one. But what do we mean by that? I actually mean in terms of the movement towards sustainable prosperity. If I break it down in very simple illustration, will be in the area of the diversification of the economic structure of these economies. From the highly volatile dependence on the highly volatile primary commodity sectors that are subject to swings in the terms of trade, with ripple effects on the domestic economies, to a diversified structure, to manufacturing, to services, and so on. It's really, it's one of changing the underlying economic structure in these economies. It can go also into the governance structures, from perennial political instabilities to stable governance infrastructure, to stability not just in the political arena, even dealing with the criminal economies, the underground economies, into the formal economies. Like the theme of transformation is huge, but in economic terms, let me just focus narrowly in the area of diversification of the economic structures. And that is why to diversify, for example, the illustration, to go and become a manufacturing economy, to industrialize, for example, rather for Nigeria, for example, rather just depending on oil and gas. And we have abundance of that, with another 34 solid minerals. But that's not the way to prosperity. No country has prospered by depending on what you dig from underground. It's now adding value, getting into manufacturers, going into the services, that you can really become a little bit, you can talk about as domestic-led and consumption-led and so on, development. But if you depend just on oil, and the oil price crashed, I experienced it during the crisis. We went from $147 a barrel to about 43 barrels a barrel. And I saw the direct consequence of that on every sector of the economy. I mean, you just go from 15-story building to being on the basement overnight. So that is the challenge that most of our African economies face. But how can you do that in a framework where you're also negotiating to have free trade agreements with Europe? You're going to sign up on that. And that's the context where you're supposed to now manufacture these commodities and sell to Europe. You haven't been able to do that under the various Cotonou agreements and all, where it was almost a non-reciprocal preferences, and now it's going to be fully reciprocal. Basically, I mean, if you put it, if you want to be pejorative, it's a call for Africa to bail out Europe.
Thank you. Thank you.
But just one on the question about the policy space. Again, my colleague, quite nice, you transferred from central bank into trade, and she used to be the governor of Central Bank of Barbados. And that is a very important question. But I think it will differ again from country to country. Fiscal policy will quickly come to the head, and there will be increasing reliance on monetary policy. And I think if we will broaden the domain of monetary policy beyond our narrow mandates of price stability into the development arena, the developmental monetary policy, where even some countries are experimenting with some forms of directed credit even to some specific sectors, such as the agriculture, which output has also a positive impact on the domestic price level, thereby achieving the domestic function of the central bank. So there could be a number of creative ways to enlarge that policy space. But the fiscal one, I absolutely agree with you. Many countries will quickly come to the head to the point of unsustainability of their fiscal policy position.
There is a question on WTO.
1 minute, if you would, but no more, please.
Yes.
Well, just on WTO, I don't believe that WTO is going to end. On the contrary, I think that both WTO and the Doha round will survive this difficult moment. What is happening with the organization is that it is now adapting to a more realistic expectation of what it can deliver, because at one time it was suffering from hubris, the idea that it could do everything. Now things are coming down to earth. But let me say that during the critical moments in the Tokyo round and in the Uruguay round, there were also many prophecies of doom about the GATT, that the GATT was dead. It's true that the GATT died, but to give away to an organization even more powerful in the Uruguay round. And those changes can happen very, very rapidly. Just to conclude on a personal note, I was the chairman of the contracting parties of the GATT in 1991, when the Uruguay round was considered practically dead after the failure of the Brussels meeting. I left Geneva in December of 1991. Less than 1 year later, the negotiations had resumed, and in 1993, the Uruguay round came to a conclusion with the creation of the WTO. So I think that people should be very cautious in making this kind of a prediction, because the world trading system is a universal public good. It is a conquest. It is a system flawed by imperfection, by imbalances, by unfairness, but in itself, it is a conquest, and I don't think it should be weakened. On the contrary, I can only think about a process of strengthening and redressing the imbalances, but not of expecting the ruin of this organization. Thank you.
On behalf of all of us, I'd like to thank the speakers for what has been a very rich discussion, and I bring this session to close.
Continue, no?
Martin knows. Martin, you're taking on chair now, yes. You will forgive me.
No, that's fine.
Martin, I'm sorry, our board members were 4 times, so it took a little longer.
Okay.
Yeah,